Hi everybody, welcome to a new video of mine. This is Hasenbraten for pokerstrategy.com. Today I'm going to be talking about Rush Poker on No Limit $10. Rush Poker, introduced by Full Tilt Poker, probably sooner or later going to occur on the other pages as well. It's definitely an interesting and funny game. Still, there is important things to consider when you want to play Rush Poker instead of normal ring games, since not only that you're like playing more hands, there is also differences in the dynamics of the play, and I'm gonna mainly be talking about these within this video. There has also been quite some while since Rush Poker has released, and even though on an L10 I didn't have the feeling that there was such a big change in comparison to the first days, there is definitely a development. So therefore, for those of you who have seen the German parts of this video which have been released earlier, the contents have changed a bit. And anyway, what we're going to go through within this video, first of all, I'm just going to talk about the main important facts about Rush Poker when it comes down to very low stakes like L10 and L5, maybe an L25 as well. So what should you be caring of? And then I'm going to talk about the question whether or not you shall play Rush Poker, because obviously it's up to you, but I'm going to try to give you advice as good as possible. And last but not least, I'm going to play one table for some time and explain to you what situations I'm possibly going to play different than in normal ring games, which I'm not playing different, and just playing a bit. So much to the content. So let's start with the first part, what you should take note of. And there is a couple of obvious things which I'm basically just gonna run through here. You definitely will be playing more hands per table. Of course, because you don't have to watch every hand till its end, even if you don't have cards, and this will result in you having a bigger hands per hour rate. That's just a fact, and it's sometimes even good because you have to take less care of like multi-table management and stuff. But keep that in mind. And what I would definitely suggest, at least when starting, is that you should be playing fewer tables than in normal games, and you should try to keep about the same hands per hour rate you had in normal games. Maybe it's sustainable to play a little more hands in Rush Poker games than in normal games, because what's usually not going to happen is, like, when you're playing on 10 tables in ring games, you're gonna get some problems when you get a hand on every single one of it. But if you're playing the same hands per hour, a little bit more with, let's say, 5 Rush Poker tables or 6 Rush Poker tables, the maximum amount of action you can get at a time is still below that. So possibly you can play a little more, but I definitely wouldn't suggest playing way more hands per hour, because as soon as you start doing this, you will just be losing focus in your game, focus in your decision, and that will necessarily lead towards you just making more mistakes and playing with a smaller win rate. And usually multi-tabling can't bring you that much back. You lose by decreasing your win rate, because it's, in my opinion, it's like easier to lose win rate, or it will happen harder that you lose your win rate while multi-tabling too hard, than multi-tabling increases your dollar per hour rate just due to the fact you're playing more hands. And what you definitely shouldn't do is what other people sometimes start to do. You're gonna be folding like marginal holdings out of late position just because you have the quick fold button. I definitely suggest not doing that. Probably even losing out a bit, losing off a bit in the light positions and raising even more, because you often get more folds by marginal hands, because people just say, well, why shall I get introduced in this part with 5-6 suit? I'm just gonna fold it. and that's it. And what I'm also gonna get through in the live video as well is always keep in mind that these blind steal situations, even if you think they are just like very marginal, I just have a marginal hand and stuff, due to the fact they occur so often, they are still pretty important. Let's say you've got an overall win rate of, I don't know, 6 big blinds per 100 hands. Okay, and how much do you win with a blind steal? Well, you're gonna get your opponent to fold preflop sometimes, and you're gonna take it down postflop sometimes. Let's say 1 big blind. Well, then it's 1 big blind per hand, and that's obviously a big difference between like 6 big blinds per 100 hands or 1 big blind per hand. So even though the situation itself appears to be marginal, I would definitely not throw such hands away, since it will just definitely cost you in your win rate. And what's also just a fact, and still for beginners, I think it's necessary to say that you will have a different table for every hand of yours. So just because you were the small blind in the last hand will not in any way force you to be the button in the next one. So you should always make sure that you do know your position and you do know all stack size and all other information that can be useful when going towards playing a hand. Of course, this is not necessary if you don't want to play your hand as well, anyways. If you already have realized your position and you've got 7 deuce, you're just folding it, okay. But besides of these situations, you should definitely really make sure you have your information, you have the valuable information available at the current, so you don't make mistakes out of this. And what's also just the fact is you're gonna have more action on one single table, and at least for me, and I guess for lots of other people as well, this is actually increasing the risk of tilt. So if you're tilting in such situations, of course this holds for normal ring games as well, but if you're tilting here, and it's out of experience, not only my experience, it's happening more easy in the rush tables than in normal tables. If you're tilting, get away from it. And if you can't handle that tilt, that extra tilt that comes from rush poker, then don't play rush poker. There's nothing wrong with not playing rush poker, but if you're really tilting there a lot, it will not make sense to play there, even though it's still a funny game though. So I guess that's a good lead towards the next slide, on which we'll be talking about the pros and the cons for or not for playing rush poker. So starting with the pros, it's definitely important. You've got less stress with multi-tabling, so you will assumingly time out less often. You don't have to to exchange broken tables. You don't have to exchange bad tables. You can just go there, click play, or I guess it's click join or something, and you're in the game. That's of course a pro because it's less stress for you. And it's just a fact, even though it's probably not that important. What's also a fact, there is different sorts of mistakes in rush poker games in comparison to ring games. So people start making mistakes they wouldn't do in a regular game, and that's definitely a pro for you. And for beginner, it's also important that you don't lose that much of a win rate or such because you don't know your opponent. You might have come through it if you're more advanced, and if it goes further, you will win some money by gaining a feeling for a certain opponent and things like that. And of course, if you don't have that feeling already, not having this history thing, not having these informations, doesn't cost you as much as it might cost somebody else. So that's a disadvantage for better players, but it's not for a beginner usually. What are the cons? First of all, there is less time for you making your decision when you're playing more hands, obviously. And usually also like your time bank is smaller and stuff, so make sure you're focused. That's definitely a con because you have less time, your average decision will be worse than in ring games. Especially if you usually tend to take time for your decision, it's probably better to just stick to the normal games. What's a very big con for rush poker is actually the fact you will be incapable or almost incapable of spotting the fish. Of course, once you have a showdown with somebody, or you see a showdown with somebody in the last hands tab or stuff, and you see somebody making a fishy play, definitely go for a node. But what you don't see is people consistently open limping, or min 3 betting and stuff because of the hands you folded, and therefore what you completely lose is the possibility to spot fishes. And that's obviously pretty important, since like even in the coachings, very often the coach says, well, this table is good, this table is bad. And you're not gonna know that. You're just playing against an average pool of players, which is very hard to judge, since I know in L10 there's sometimes even more than 1,000 people playing on one single table effectively. So it's almost impossible to judge the full player pool in terms of profitability, and therefore that's definitely a con, because you can't spot the profitable spot on the table. That's bad for you. What's also bad for you is, well, your opponents might be forced, or at least pulled into a direction making certain mistakes. You might be pulled into that direction as well. I already had that on the last slide, but definitely make sure that you're like not starting folding raisable hands out of late position, or doing things like this just because you say, well, I'm gonna get another hand. Keep in mind that this other hand is just when you have a win rate of 6 big blinds per 100, this next hand is gonna win you right 0.06 big blinds on average if you're playing one more hand. 0.12 big blinds if you're playing two hands while folding the one. So if you have a spot you can play profitably, hope that it will occur and then take it, because still, even on the low stakes, poker is a game of small edges, and I wouldn't give such an edge away. So definitely don't go for that. And you will be doing that. Happens to me as well when I'm playing rush poker. This happened, and therefore it's definitely a con against playing rush poker. What's also very important, maybe it's even the most important fact or the most important point at all, unfortunately it's a con, you're not learning anything or almost nothing in a direction of villain-based play. So you don't learn how to read an opponent after having played a couple of hands with him. You don't learn how to categorize people just after a few hands. You don't see somebody start tilting and how he's tilting and how you can play back against it. You just don't see it. And that obviously sucks, because if you don't see your opponent doing such stuff, you will lose lots of profitable spots, first of all. And second of all, for a beginner, you should of course always view your game like as the chance, because on an L10 you're not gonna get rich, but if you're gonna be successful on an L10, you're gonna get a basis for being successful on an L100, on an L600, on an L2K, and there you can make some money. So if you start learning slower on the rush poker tables in comparison to the normal ones, it's definitely a con versus playing rush poker, and probably you then shouldn't do it. And that's why my personal advice for a beginner would be don't play rush poker. My roommate, for example, also is playing poker on the micro stakes, and he started playing rush poker pretty early, and he liked it, and he said, wow, this is rush. And I always said to him, well, if I were you, I would stick to the normal games and try to become better, because even if you're maybe winning a small amount of money more per hour there than on the other tables, in the long run, it's not going to be good. So that's a con. And what's also a con is there is differences in the dynamics of normal ring games in comparison to rush poker games. And these ain't too easy to understand. So that does go into theoretical detail a bit, and it's a change to normal ring games, and it's hard to understand, especially for a beginner, and therefore it's also the question if it's like necessary to get into that direction. What's also in the same direction, there can be things you're doing in a ring game and you think it's right, and because you're doing it in Rush Poker, and in Rush Poker it's unfortunately wrong, because especially when it goes down to aggression and stuff, especially preflop, where the preflop broke ranges and stuff might be different than in normal games. This can definitely lead towards mistakes, and because you probably don't understand this point, this can definitely become a problem once you stop playing Rush Poker. Maybe you grind yourself up from NL10 to NL100 in Rush Poker, and then you say, well, let's go and play some normal games. And you're probably going to have a tough time seeing what's still the same and seeing what has changed. Yes. Okay, this was mainly a theoretical approach on pros and cons of Rush Poker. There is, of course, further things to take note of, like an example, the fact that on average, preflop all-in ranges are tighter than in normal ring games. An example, I guess also here, the preflop aggression is sometimes different in a way that it's sometimes more polarized than in ring games and stuff like this, but that's something you're probably going to find out on your own. What I wanted to talk about here is whether or not to play it. What's definitely another important point is the changed preflop dynamics, but since this is also more of an advanced topic, I'm going to talk about it in the 50 video. So become silver so you can see it. The last thing to say in here before we stick to the live session is a summary, and for me it's definitely Rush Poker is fun and I like playing Rush Poker from time to time, but as I already said, my advice to beginner would be not to play Rush Poker due to the learning argumentation. So as a beginner, the most important thing you can do is learn and become a better player, and that's harder on Rush Poker, and that's why I would recommend playing normal games. But in the end, it's obviously up to you. I just can give you an advice, but the best advice I can give you, besides the fact I think that it's better to play ring games instead of Rush Poker, is that you should always be playing what you have the best motivation for. Because if you want to go to the Rush tables and if you want to play Rush Poker because you want to feel the rush, then go for it. Because you're going to spend more time there, you're going to be more focused while playing, you're going to play better, and you're going to become a better player even there than if you're going for the ring games and you say, wow, this ring game, it's so boring, I don't like playing ring games. Like this. I mean, remember when you were a child and somebody told you to do something, you usually don't like that. Usually you're better at stuff you're doing because you want to do them. You're better at playing computer games than math at school. Because you want to play computer games, you don't want to do math at school. And therefore, I would advise everybody to go for ring games, but if you don't want to go for ring games because you love Rush Poker, then go for the Rush Poker. It's definitely better than not playing at all from a poker point of view. Anyways, so far with the presentation, as I said, we're gonna have a live session now, which is gonna come, and yeah, see you in a second. Well, so welcome everybody again to the Rush Poker live session. While we talked about some basic stuff earlier, just be inclined to play some hands here, and I'm just gonna play one table since I think that's definitely gonna lead towards us having enough action and enough hands to talk about, while still not being like too busy with it, thanks to the auto fold button. And here we're gonna play a couple of hands. And the first hand of the small blind, to the blinds, I definitely 3-bet with the queens, even on Rush Poker tables. While in position, in the light position with the ace king, I often prefer calling. You can definitely 3-bet, especially against mid stack, but calling often is definitely a fine option as well. And especially here, where sometimes people play way tighter against 3-bets, you probably should not 3-bet ace king. So I decided against it. I actually still think that raising the flop is a little bit overplayed, and I'm going to play my hand pretty cautious here, since there's often just two possibilities. Either he's not paying me at all, I'm crushed, or he's got a lot of equity. and that's why I'm not gonna raise broke on the flop, because like he can have Ice Jack, he can have Kings, Queens, Tens, he can have King, Queen or such, and if he's just got pocket sevens, I'm not gonna get anything. So I'm just gonna call here once with my top pair. If he bets a turn again, I'd probably fold. Since he doesn't, I'm gonna bet fold it once for every showdown, and I think that's a tight, but definitely a takeable line, and not much of a difference to ring games. You should also keep in mind that, or I'm going to try to keep in mind that we're not going to play too deep stacked here, because what's also happening is, of course, like here you play all your hands on one single table, which will occur, which will lead towards you being more often deep than you are in normal tables. Like if I'm playing 8 tables, I am often I'm having a smaller average stack than if I'm playing just one table, and therefore all my hands I'm playing at one table. So if I'm up on that table, if everything I'm up, I'm going to be up at this table. So I'm going to be deep way more often, and therefore you should definitely go for a reload a couple of times, like just quit the table and rejoin it if you're getting too deep. This hand is wow. Well, probably not interesting anymore. Actually, I have to say I would have been tight and folded to the initial raise here 300, because that's a board on which there is just a very big amount of hands that beat me, and just a very little amount of hands that actually I beat. So I want to have a where is that handgun? Last hand, hello? Let me see that Jack's hand. No, not my 7-2's hand. It's not already in there or what? Someone's kidding me right now? Or he's arranging it in a strange way. Well, I'm gonna recap it, but I'm definitely interested in right. Nice hand. So the Razor had 7-8 for the top two, so folding against him already would have been correct, even though in range it's closer. And actually the shipping guy had the stone cold nuts straight with a straight, so if somebody's like, if you bet and somebody raises and there's even a straight possible and 2-pair stuff is likely, there's basically no way in us being good anymore. Very often it's like here, where we're completely crushed in that situation, obviously. On the other hand, what I'm basically doing here is we're basically playing a straightforward ring game style. What you could do is, if you've got some info, I definitely suggest trying to play a little bit looser in position, like especially on the button. Just you bet a little bit on the button, even if you're a beginner. Don't overdo it, like don't do it in every situation, but if you're having somebody raise from MP3 or from the cutoff and you're on the button, you can definitely try to go for 3-bet once in a while. While still this hand, it's pretty hard to play, and for a beginner, I definitely suggest folding, because if you play it right, you're just gonna win little, while if you're playing it wrong, you're gonna lose a lot, and that's why I definitely suggest not overdoing it. In this case, I'm isolating, since I expect him just to be weak often enough to justify. So he'll either be folding pre-flop, or he'll be check folding the flop quite frequently, which just leads towards me isolating quite a wide range he has in a normal ring game, because I think the raise itself is gonna show immediate profit, and like here he's just folding pre-flop. That's definitely fine. And all these low suited crap hands don't need to be played, which is good news about Rush poker. Still, what I'm serious about is I definitely not suggest like tightening up on button and cutoff, because you have to wait until you can make a decision. Like if you have a hand you just want to steal, I definitely still go for the maximize your EV play style, instead of just saying, well, I'm not winning a lot, so I'm folding, because don't be kidding on yourself. If you've got a hand you can fold first in, and you can raise first in, your opponents are going to be folding very often pre-flop or post-flop. So by this one hand, you're probably going to win 1 BB in it. Just one big blind. which will be 100 big blinds in 100 hands, which is an incredibly big amount of money. And so even if you just get first in one out of 3 cases, you're still going to win 30 BB per 100, which is certainly going to be more than your normal win rate. So you should definitely not be folding these hands, even though you can maybe play one more hand in the same time. Because like if you've got an EV of, if you're playing at 10 BB even, you've got to play 3 hands in the time until you're in the light position first in to justify. And I doubt that's actually the case. King Queen was UTG out of the blinds is also just crap, obviously. But definitely keep that in mind. Even though you say, oh well, that's so marginal. Don't really. It's not that marginal actually. Stealing the blinds definitely is no marginal thing to talk about, because even if you're just winning like 1 BB per hand, just 1 BB per hand is like is a ridiculous big number, of course, because you're winning so much less out of the late position. So I'd always like wait if I'm in the late position with the hand I can raise first in to get there. From the button, I'd usually suggest to just raise 3 BB. Usually on the cutoff, I'd also just raise 3, even though on the low stakes there's nothing wrong with raising 4. Probably on L10 I'd actually go for the 4 BB raise, even though on higher stakes I'd probably raise a little bit less. It's just the deception and the initiative is just worse, less is just got like less of use in the lower stakes, where people play less concentrated and less focused on the game and just focus more on their hands, where you can't win that much from deception. Well, fortunately yet I haven't had a situation which I can explain to you while 3-betting here could work. So I keep on folding until I get one. But we'll see. That's an example. It would have been a situation. Of course, there's the argument of with some people's small blind raises first in being a little bit stronger than in ring games, but I don't think it's going to be that much stronger in an average, that I shouldn't be 3-betting there sometimes. And well, since I'm probably not going to see this guy ever again, he's just going to have a tough time deciding whether I'm bluffing or not. And usually in the first hands, without info, people tend to play tight, people tend to play forward. That's why you're going to win some money. That's a situation which you could think about to 3-bet, definitely. Yeah, probably would have been better. It's definitely a spot in which you can go for it. Well, it's still against UTG, I don't like it that much. It's MP1. It's not really necessary. The board basically sucks, because especially since the board is ace queen high, he's very often going to have hit it, and therefore I'm not going to try to bluff him, because I think this is just a board structure which I can't attack profitably, because it's just going to have it too often. If the board was of a different shape, I would probably have gone for it, hoping to be able to show such a hand within this video as well. Yeah, it's just, you always have to think about the initial range of your opponent and then see how it improves on a certain board you're currently seeing. And you'll just see that a tight UTG range on an ace-queen high board will very often either have an ace or queen. You can't be that comfortable trying to fold that out, and that's why I'm not trying to. Here I'm just betting my pair on the flop, even though it's more or less a bluff, since he's rarely calling worse. I'm just protecting my equity here in case I get called. I have a slight chance of showing the hand down and winning. And I have also a slight chance of just improving against a better hand with a 5 or king. And that's actually mainly why I bet the flop. And if I lose it, then I lose it. Like here, turn bricks, and I'm not gonna play like check call or stuff with straight pair. In rare cases, I'm gonna be ahead against the stupid ace high call on the flop, or against the gut shot call on the flop. But on average, I guess he's just gonna have the better hand. And of course, my playability also sucks like hell. Because if I check all the turn, I really don't know where I'm at. I don't know how to play the river, and therefore I'm just gonna map my hand on the turn. Without much doubt. Well, out of MP1, It's a bit too tight with King 10 suited, so I'm just gonna muck that hand there. And well, that's definitely the nice part about rush poker. You can just fold your hands. You don't have to wait all that long, and the action is definitely focused on one table. So like making a video here, even though there's unfortunately nothing I can talk about like with the opponents, overall it's still more easy to just like comment on one table because I can more be better focused. Pocket eights are big enough for me to raise out of MP1. Well, I guess with the eights it's okay. If you're having deuces here, minds might change about such a hand, but pocket eights should be a raise from MP1 in my position, in my opinion, first, and even on the low stakes, because it's just going to be profitable. Because pocket eights, you will be taking down the pot on the showdown with a pair way more often than with a hand like night before, like deuces or so. That would be a spot if he was big state. I could definitely 3-bet. 10-8 off is not the best hand. If you had a suited one, would definitely be better. But since we're mainly taking the profit out of the fold equity preflop, you can as well go for an offsuit hand. I wouldn't go for 7 deuce or stuff, or for like real shitty hands. But 10-8 off is high card strength, strong enough, and connected enough for me to justify. That's also a board you could think about checking behind. I'm actually more a fan of bet folding it. I'm not gonna go fancy here, but I also don't want to check back because my hand is even too weak to be like called down. But I also don't like playing check behind flop fold turn. So I'm just gonna bet here. In case I get called, I'm definitely gonna be cautious. I'm sometimes gonna be ahead against a flush draw, or gut shot that's got nothing besides. But I do again have some outs, and I prefer c-betting it. Since he just min bets, I'm raising over it against the serious sized bet. I would act different, but a min bet I usually just view as a check, and therefore I act as if it was check to me. And since I already decided before to make a c-bet, in case I get min-bet on, I just raise over the min-bet as if it was my c-bet. Of course, I have to raise a little bit bigger than to bet because he's got more money in the pot, so he's getting better odds. If I bet the same amount, so I'm going to make it a little bit more, but that's it. This is a pretty marginal situation. I don't know. In the past, I was very tempted to complete such hands. I'm not that convinced it's profitable anymore, actually. I don't think against, assuming the bad players, it can be a big mistake against the limper. But it's probably minus UE, so I'll just muck these hands out of position. It's just, I mean, in this case, at least both of them were full stacked. Then it's probably okay, but if at least one of them is like just half stacked, I'm pretty sure that it's not going to be plus UE, like completing 7-9 off anymore. And well, I'm really not getting that many hands, unfortunately. It takes a bit. Yeah. Here it's close again. You can complete it. There's not a big difference between 9-7 and 10-9. Even though I'm usually more tempted to complete 10-9 instead of 9-7, of course. Here the big blind was just half stacked. That's why I folded it. I guess you can do both. You can either complete it or you can leave it. It's probably going to be a more or less neutrally weak decision. And since in rush poker, it's really not that important what you do in my 0 EV situation, since it won't affect anything that you do later, because, well, nobody's going to realize if you complete the small blind more often or less often. It's probably really up to you how you play it here in rush poker. In ring games, it would probably make sense to play these 0 EV spots, because by playing 0 EV spots, you often increase your EV in other situations. So even though a hand itself is going to show a neutral EV, the hand in the context of other hands can actually show a positive EV, even though this sounds probably strange on the first glance. Well. Heads up, this is even a spot in which you can go for a raise. You don't have to. The reason why you can raise here is basically because you expect your opponent to play rather straightforward post flop and to take it down here pretty often. In this case against him it probably would have not been a good idea since he is not fold. But luckily I have top 2, so I'm gonna play bet. I'm also even betting big because this is somewhat of a blank to a 10 and I'm looking forward to get paid by draws and by a 10. River sucks a bit. I'm going to bet it quite smallish to still give him the option of calling with a 10. I don't think he's going to raise with if he's got the nut flush draw. And that's it. But I don't want to play like check call because I guess he's checking back a 10 pretty often. And I don't know how often he is, as a matter of fact, going to try to semi-bluff, to pure bluff a busted flush draw. And that's why I decided to make a small bet on my own instead of actually check calling it. Since he insta-max, he probably really just had the draw. If I would have won anything or not, in case I checked, is of course the other question, because he folded quite quick, so he was probably somewhat certain about his play. So I guess he would have often insta-checked behind. And this is also a fairly standard situation. So I raise king queen out of middle position. And well, let's see about the flop ones. And if I get called here on such a board, I usually give my opponent credit. I guess this is just going to be an ace too often for me to barrel here. Even though in some cases he's gonna have a 10, he's folding it. In some cases I'm even gonna have the best hand, but overall I think this is just gonna be ace X. And that's it. I was just talking about me at least beating the gut shots. But okay, you never can like exclude the possibility of people making somewhat strange calls. But okay, that's probably close. But with 8s, I'm gonna make a value raise here, since by equity I'm just gonna have the best hand. And yeah, that's it. Even though the playability post-flop obviously is not all that great. And I guess on this flop, I'm just gonna turn my hand into a bluff and bet it. I doubt I'm gonna get called here very often. And if I get called, I'm usually done with the hand. But I prefer betting once instead of like checking and reevaluating. I even think that there is a good chance of him just folding here, so it's probably okay. And I can't really go for a check call, so I give it up. Turn obviously kills my hand because I don't expect him to call with lots more than a top pair or a flush draw or a second pair, and everything beats me on the turn. I don't expect he's like ever folding an ace or a king on the turn. He's obviously not folding a flush, so I'm usually going to be crushed. Luckily, he had actually jack 10, so the gut shot with the backdoor flush, not getting there, not bluffing, but yeah, that's not really something you can expect. Well, I guess we're slowly coming to an end. I didn't really have one of the situations where I also wanted to talk about the 3-betting in position. But, well, it's really just, if you're having somebody who's raising from a rather late position, like from cutoff or MP3, and you're sitting on the button, it's just a spot in which I'd be more inclined to 3-bet in the rush poker games, even on the low stakes, than I'd be in ring games, just because I expect the full equity, or also out of my experience, which I had about playing rush poker a couple of times, out of videos or with my roommate on the low stakes, that you have more full equity here than you probably will have in the ring games on the same stakes, especially full ring. But unfortunately, well, you're not that often on the button with the right guy raising, and therefore even we were playing for 20 minutes already. There has not been such a situation, and therefore I guess I'm gonna quit it for now, saying thank you for watching. I hope I could give you somewhat of an attempt whether or not to play rush poker. I guess it's also more of a point of view thing, like whether we want to play it or not. But I can give you some pros and cons whether or not to play. And here on the low stakes, it's basically straightforward ring gameplay. Like here, I just raise my button. I've got nothing, more or less nothing. I see bet the flop. In case I get called, I try to check my small fleshy down. Yeah, I don't think I can value bet this. Wow. Okay, not against queens with the straight nuts. But he checks it quite quick. Okay. Anyways, thank you for watching. Okay, this to be the last hand, okay. Why ever he's limping? Flop chips, I bet. You could think about checking, but overall I usually think that betting in this case is better than checking. I mean, if he's got a small pocket, he's probably going to check it back. He would call, but he's probably going to check it back. The chin brings another overcard, you bet, then he's folding. Stuff like this. Overall, it's always interesting to think about, but in lots of situations, in my opinion, the straightforward value bet is the best line to take. So I take it there as well after a short debate. He folds and that's it. So, till then, I wish you good luck on the tables yourself. And, well, this would also have been a situation which you could 3-bet against the MP3. Well, the MP3 guy mainly. But it's not all that necessary. So, against the short stack, I'm definitely folding. And till then, I wish you good luck at the tables. If you want to play rush poker, have fun playing rush poker. If you don't want to play rush poker, have fun playing anything else. Till then, bye bye. Thanks for watching. This was Hasenbraten for pokerstrategy.com. Well, I'm going to play the kings. Okay, that's the last hand now. That's cool. Wow. Okay, bye bye.